I started getting past trying to change the what's and got curious to the whys. It was in that season of my life that was like, wait a minute, there's more to all of this.
Miracles do happen if you just step inside and tap in.
People don't know what to do when they don't know how to control you.
Get to a place of just say, I feel at peace.
There were some things in my versatility that had me insecure. But once I started to embrace, I was like, wait, this is part of who I am. This is, this works out for me.
Welcome back to Between Us with Ashleen Chand. I'm your host, Ashleen. And today's episode is something we all wrestle with, whether we speak it out loud or not. And that is, are we living from who we truly are or from who we've been shaped to be? Joining me today is Dante, a man whose life lives at the intersection of discipline, spiritual inquiry, and deep service. A fitness coach, a theologist, and most importantly, someone who has never been afraid to ask the hard inner questions. A man who has not only gained knowledge through continuous learning, experience, but lived an integrated wisdom, which is why I invited him here today. Dante, welcome. Did I miss anything in your introduction?
Oh no, well put.
All
Thank
right.
you, thank you. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you chose the word theologist
Okay.
versus theologian.
There is a difference.
There is a difference.
Okay.
There is a difference. There are those like myself who have attended and gone to theology school.
Mm-hmm.
For the purpose of service, I served as a Christian minister
Okay.
when I was young. And you are taught to teach what you have been taught in a theology school,
Yes.
but then you have theologians that go into more in-depth studies that goes beyond what our Western theology schools train us, indoctrinate us with.
Okay.
I'll use those words. And much of what theologians do, they dispel. And they
That's
dispel.
a big distinction.
Yes, they dispel a lot of the myths that have been put into modern theology. And they give us a lot more in-depth truths, archaeological wise, ancient wise, historical wise. And so, so when people use the word theologian, I'm not a theologian. I have a lot more to learn, but I am a theologist.
And that is a very important distinction, and thank you for bringing that up to my attention.
Yes.
And I'm sure those who are listening and watching it can benefit from that as well, because, sometimes we offhandedly, and I'm guilty of this, use terms without thinking, but it is education and every day is a learning process. So thank you for breaking that down.
Absolutely.
Now, you're here to talk about a topic that you actually picked yourself, which is personality versus soul.
Yes.
And this is a conversation and a topic that, as you and I go through this conversation, I hope it shakes not something more loose in us and makes us take a step back and reflect, but also for the audience as well. So I want to ask you, and let's just dive right in, is why this topic?
Well, for one, it has been something I've been diving into for about the past 7 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Just from my basic studies in theology, in combination with curiosity I started having about myself, that took me into wanting to know that there was something deeper. There's just something more on the surface of what I'm learning, scriptural wise, or just knowledge wise. There is something more. There was always something in me that said there's something more. And so when I went on that search and started diving into other avenues of spirituality, other avenues of truth, I started getting answers on top of a lot of life. Life started happening, struggles, challenges that steered more of that curiosity of wanting to know, why do I respond certain ways? Why do I react certain ways? Why is it hard for me to get over this habit? Why this and why that? And not only for myself, but even people I was engaged with,
Right.
whether it's family members, colleagues, or even neighbors, strangers at the grocery store and the gas station, things of that sort. So it has been something I've been diving into again for like the past 7 years.
So is there something happening in your life in the recent years that you said, no, I really need to, I've explored this topic, I've opened it up, but now I really want to dive deeper? Is that why it was laying on your chest a bit more heavy?
Yes, and I've seen what it has done for my own self development, what it has done for learning how to forgive myself, learning to have compassion for myself. And that's just on an individual basis. But when I see what is happening collectively with our species, with humanity, how things have increased and intensified, not so much changed, because there's nothing new, but the way things have intensified,
In
I can
terms
say
of
that
how we react.
how we react, how we've been engaging with one another. When I think about a lot of the conversations that are being had on social media and through the news and things of that sort, whether it's on relationships, whether it's on politics, whether it's in business. Everyone is a self-proclaimed expert on everything now. This is
Yes.
one of the reasons why I had to give that difference between theologian and theologist as well. But I'm realizing that in those conversations, in these topics, there's still a little bit of blame and warring and finger pointing and not much going
Within.
within at all, which is where the real responsibility lies.
Since we're talking about personality and soul,
Yes.
let's start with personality. That's the constructed identity that the first layer, shall I say, that we present to the world.
Yes.
It's a mix of choices, habits, our conditioning, our environment, patterns. But the question is, how much of it did we really choose? I want to ask you is what parts of your personality developed from your upbringing? Only focus on the personality component right now.
One in particular is my versatility. I consider myself a very versatile individual because of the things that I was exposed to early in my childhood. That has really worked out for me in my adulthood. First, it had me kind of insecure about there were some things in my versatility that had me insecure. But once I started to embrace, I was like, wait, this is part of who I am. This is, this works out for me.
Dante, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and because I know you personally, so I am going to take a little bit more of a liberty here. So I'll tell the audience that. But liberty, but also honoring you, and to the extent that you feel comfortable, because of what you just said, it allowed you to be versatile. And so rather than feeling insecure about your upbringing, you embraced it. And I think a lot of people listening in could benefit. So to the degree that you feel comfortable, could you expand and provide a little bit more color?
Absolutely. Born and raised in Sacramento, California. For many of the listeners that don't know much about Sacramento, California, very similar to other big cities, big metropolitans. You have certain parts of the city which are, suburban, inner city, urban, things of that sort. Neighborhoods that are, not too nice, not too safe, and so forth and so on. And one of the more unsafe neighborhoods, very known unsafe neighborhoods, parts of Sacramento was South Sacramento. And so I was born and raised in South Sacramento. In that upbringing, there is, for lack of better words, the norm that comes with that kind of upbringing, that's where there's a lot of gang violence, there's a lot of, drug dealing and things of that sort. And me being an 80s baby, I love being, I pride myself for being an 80s baby. Nothing like the 80s. That's another part of my personality.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
nostalgic. I love nostalgia.
really
I get a
is.
high off of nostalgia. But growing up in the 80s, around that time, when you think about the music and you think about the movies that were out, more particular in the area that I came up in, we heard a lot more of the NWA. We heard a lot more of the Too Short. Me being from Sacramento, California, I'm naming West Coast artists. But they spoke in their lyrics a lot what was happening, in the California gang culture, the California, pimping culture, which was happening everywhere. It wasn't just happening in California. And a lot of the hip hop artists and actors in movies was displaying what was happening everywhere. But it was more specific, it was much more explicit from their lyrics what was happening. And I saw it firsthand. I wasn't just listening to it in the music. It
You were
wasn't just a
living it.
trend. Yeah, it wasn't just a trend.
Yeah.
And I use that word trend emphasized because that's what a lot of today is. A lot of
Yeah.
people in that life are doing it because it's a trend. But it was what I was exposed to. It was my environment. And so, my family were gang members. My, my mother and my uncles were drug dealers. And it was something I saw all the time. And so I knew the lyrics to these songs verbatim at age of like 7, 8 years old. The movies that were out then, I'm watching them, and then I'm seeing it being acted out in the
Real
streets
life.
that I live
Yeah.
in. Yeah, I witnessed my first murder at 8 years old.
You went from insecure to embracing where you came from to where you sit now. How did that personality change with your upbringing? And I thank you for sharing your background, because there's a lot of us, and it's so easy when things aren't going right in life that you fall into the victim mentality of where you came from. But you sit here now with the various hats and roles that you have worn and continue to do with deep service. How did you distinguish that layer of personality of not talking how you were exposed to environment and anchoring yourself so that you could be well spoken to sit in front of the camera to engage with the audience at large?
Well, because even during that time of my upbringing, although that's what I was mostly exposed to, there were other things that I was exposed to that really grabbed my attention a lot more than what I was seeing on a day to day basis. And those things that I was exposed to was something that it was, I really still can't find the words to it, but something in me was like, why does this feel like bliss? Why does this feel like this is what life is supposed to be? Why does this feel like, and it was moments like, for instance, when I just described everything that I saw as a child. I have my godmother. My godmother was very instrumental in my upbringing. My birth mother was only 17 when she had me. And my godmother was much older. And she would tell my mother, she was like, "You got this young baby out here. You out here running the street. I'm taking him." And so I went and lived with her for a while, or I would be with her every weekend. And she would do things with me along with my god siblings. She would do things like wake us up early in the morning, and we would jump on 80 West to Marin County and drive through San Francisco, and she would take us to the ocean shore and tell us to look out, look at that view. We would drive through the vineyards of Marin County and the mansions out there. She would play different music while we were driving out there. She would be playing Kenny G. She would be playing Phil Collins and things of that sort. And watching the scenery and listening to those sounds was totally, different than what I was hearing on a day-to-day basis. And it just
And
started
that's what
pulling
I'm going to
things out of
ask
me.
you next, is that how did you then separate or marry the two to help you become Dante? And as you got through and along from your teenage to 20s, for you to, and I apologize, it's not to be rude, but like I said, I'm going to take certain liberties because Dante knows and understands me. And I'm not
Absolutely.
trying
Yes, I
to be
do.
rude.
Not at all.
But sometimes, how did you not fall into that statistic of not letting your environment dictate as to how far you can go?
I didn't judge. Now that I have the understanding of what it means to judge something, I
But you didn't
realized
then.
I realized that I never did that. I never judged where I came from. There's a difference, because what I mean by that is it didn't mean that I didn't see where I came from and was like, this is not what I want for my life. This is not how I want to raise my children when I get older, so forth and so on. But I did not see one environment better as the other one.
Could you expand more? Because there are advantages, and that does shape your personality, because we are talking about the personality, and that is a big component of how you show up, and the first layer that you present to the world.
I saw the distinctions between the two, but I didn't polarize them. I didn't say one environment is bad, the other one is good. For some reason, I was able to see the advantages in both.
That's great.
I was able to see the contributions that both were making
That is a big
into
word.
who I am.
Sorry, not a big word, but a very important word that we forget is the contribution of each of the different environments.
Yes.
So not one is not superior than the other. I mean, though there will be arguments and people are welcome to the opinions, but I understand. I fully get what you just said right now.
And I'm glad you that word contribution stuck out to you
Simple
because
word, big impact.
very, very big impact because as we'll get more in depth to it, the soul doesn't see things from a polar
Hold that
perspective.
till we get to
Yeah,
till
doesn't
we
see
get
things
to
from,
that
our,
part.
our personalities have learned how to do that. And our personality has learned how to do that because we think the only reality is what we can see, touch, taste, hear, and smell.
With the five senses.
Whatever external presents to us, we think that's what it really is. And so that's when the comparisons come in. That's when the competition comes in. That's when the judgment comes in. Who's superior? Who's inferior? Who's the winner? Who's the loser?
Right.
But the soul sees it as just experience.
But it's hard to make that distinction when you are young. So,
Oh yes.
I keep coming back to that, Dante, is because if you now could advise the younger generation who are our future, if they are in an environment to the one you described, how can they change their mindset and be taking what is being presented to them, but use it as being versatile, not being judgmental? Because nowadays, so many things are thrown in our way that judging has just become innate in us to a certain extent. And I can't speak for the general populace as such, but this is just you and I just having a conversation, other people listening in.
Yeah. Well, because it's amazing that you use the word "in it" because it does seem like the normal thing to do. It just seems like it's part of our nature to do. To answer your question, talking to someone much younger, the brain is not really analyzing, is really taking what they see as being truth. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I would really encourage the authority figures that are watching to start exposing them to those things, to different things. You know
Like
what I mean?
your
And not based on
godmother did with you, taking you out of town on the
exactly,
weekends. Okay.
exactly, and even doing that from a non-judgmental perspective, but expose them to different things that they once they start to analyze and they can start to make decisions, they can realize, okay, this is what I'm interested in, this is my preference, this is what I would like to do, this is who I want to become. Then the picking is right there for them.
Is the older teens to young adults, right? Their personality is kind of it's not fully baked, but
No.
they think they already have become the person that they're going to be for the rest of their lives. And you're laughing because you know exactly what I'm
Yes,
talking
because
about.
I've done it myself.
What would your advice be to them if they are grown up in conditions that are not the best for their success, and for them to be able to turn on a different switch in their head for their long-term growth, for their own success, and however they want to grow?
I would say this is you're going to feel like you know. You're going to feel like you know it all. You are that's that part. And so one thing I will say first off is you don't know it all.
Yes.
But what I will say is this is don't be afraid to be curious and take risks right now. Look at what you have been shown. Look at what you have been told and simply ask yourself, is there more? Is this all to what it is? And if this is not all, if there is more, I encourage you and challenge yourself to go and find out, to really go and find out. Because I will tell you, like I tell my children, I have grown children. My oldest son is 24, my daughter's 22, I have an 18-year-old. When they say something that sounds like as if they really know, my response is, okay, come talk to me in 10 years.
So if I understand you correctly, your advice is just start small. Just start with that one question that you want to find the answer to for yourself, and then follow the breadcrumbs or the any spurts of answers that you get that will lead you out of where you are into something bigger and better.
Curiosity is very powerful.
Okay.
Curiosity is a great superpower counteract to control and being mentally enslaved. When you can really challenge the five senses of what has been told to you by saying, you know what, let me at least, see. Let
Try
me
it
at
on
least
a different
ask. Let me
lens.
at least try. And it's amazing, we're talking about this because just on last night, I'm talking to my 18-year-old who's getting ready to graduate high school, been playing football all his life, and we just, knew there was going to be football scholarships, just coming out of everywhere. And he's very great academically. I mean, 4.0 student.
Wow.
And so we're
Proud
also
dad.
going after, very proud. And so we're also going after academic scholarships as well. But one of the things he's doing is thinking about different majors. He was really, really interested in computer engineering, which he still is. And he came to me last night. He said, Dad, I'm, thinking about my major and I'm thinking about, what schools would be good for that major. He said, but I'm also thinking about what would be good for my minor because I'm really interested in cinema as well, and I said, you know what, son? And this just hit me just because of what I know about the soul and I know about personality and curiosity. I said, you know what, son? You might wake up in the morning and have a different interest.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. And I said, I'm going to support you in that. I said, you want to know why? I said, because, you know, the five, from a five sensory perception, and I got that term from author Gary Zukov, who taught me a lot about this. I learned a lot about this from his books. Because from a five sensory perception, we would think that he's being indecisive
This is very much true. Very much true, yes.
versus his soul trying to lead his personality
Oh.
and to make sure that he is open to any untapped potential. And so, me as a father, as what I've learned from Gary Zukov, as well as trying to be a multi-sensory perception led father, is to support that. Versus, well, you need to pick something and stick to it because there's no guarantees in this world.
Well,
I'm
there's
not
no
about to,
guarantees
you
with.
know, no, there aren't any guarantees in the five sensory world, none whatsoever. But from a multi-sensory perception, once you are consciously aware and intentional about the decision that you make, there is, you know,
So
there is some greater possibilities.
you're giving him the freedom to say you have choices and that you are not fixated on your personality is not you being a professional football player, and your scholarship that you have earned is amazing and you'll do it for the love of sport, but that doesn't define you because oftentimes when you're young you want to lead forward with that and you're so afraid to make changes. And it's so refreshing to hear you say, I'm going to encourage you and say you can change your mind tomorrow and I'll still support it because you are allowed to change and evolve and you are not going to be stuck to something even though that is going to be a very, it's recognized as something, being a computer engineer, it's well recognized and
Right.
could fare you well in the future, but the future isn't guaranteed. Today is.
Right, and then even if you do accomplish great things in doing that, will you be fulfilled?
So Dante, we were talking about as you were growing up in your environment, because you didn't judge, you embraced all of it. Take me back to that time. Did you choose yourself, and what parts were forced upon you?
The parts I chose for myself were the things I took preference in,
Such as?
such as the type of music I liked.
Mm.
The even at that young age, the type of partner I would like when I got older, whether a certain race. I wasn't locked down to a certain race or anything like that. So things of that sort, what kind of food, I would like and, eat when I get older, things of that sort. Now, the things that I felt were forced on me but still made huge contributions was what school I would go to at that time, what city, state I would live in at that time. For instance, my mother just uprooted us from California at my age, at the age of 11, to Mississippi. We lived in Mississippi for 2 years.
That's quite a contrast.
Right? And that was nothing I had no control over, none whatsoever. And so at that age, I felt like I was forced. I had no choice. I had to. And there were some experiences there at the time that were hurtful, that was embarrassing, also cultural shock because Mississippi, in contrast to California in 1991, it was very, very different. There was still a lot of 1940s, 50s, and 60s mindset happening in the state of Mississippi.
Hopefully the audience knows because I was still in Fiji during that time.
Okay.
So you're talking about what the mindset towards different colored people?
Yes.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. Although there were, of course, no more Jim Crow laws, they were still living in a Jim Crow mindset. By the time we moved out there,
tough, Dante.
very tough. Coming from California in 1991 to state of Mississippi, which was very heavy into segregation, back in those days when it was operating, it was still, like I said, being displayed. It was still in the mindset. So when we moved there, very small town. Matter of fact, this is the town my mother was born in. The black kids had their school, which we went to, of course. And the white kids, their school was on the other end of the county.
That could do a number on your psyche. So your personality going from California, how did it adjust? And then how did you, at that really impressionable age, between 11 from when you moved to 13 that you were there, the 2 years, not take on any of the animosity, the anger, because I'm sure that must have come through in the time that you spent there based on your experience, and not let it just make you a disgruntled person, angry at the world.
I would say this. I was angry. I was angry. I didn't show it. At that time, my anger would be explosive. It would be when it got to a point to where, forget it. This is how I really feel. This is what I think. But at the times that I would suppress it for the sake of, not wanting my mother to know that I was angry or that I was disappointed or things of that sort. So there was some anger. There was, I'm still human. There was some anger when we first heard that we were moving to Mississippi, especially at my mind and 11. Remember, I'm getting ready to go into an analytical way of thinking, approaching 12 years old. When I hear the word Mississippi, I'm already picturing and perceiving what the California, or not just California, but the education system has already told us how life was for the southern states then. So that's what I'm already picturing. Versus, I got the beach here.
Right.
I got, snow and Lake Tahoe. My classroom has an equal amount of blacks, whites, Asians, Latinos.
We do have a little bit of a melting pot here in California. We are very, very blessed in that way.
Absolutely. And so to uproot us from that and to go there, it was like, what in the world are we going to get when we get there? And then to see that is what it still looked like out there, it was a culture shock for us, and it really intensified my anger a little bit more. But thank goodness I still had already cultivated in my personality openness and contribution. I didn't know the words then, but I still had that because there are things I learned and was exposed to in Mississippi that played a very huge part in my work ethic, my discipline, my consistency, just knowing how to be a hard worker. Because my family here in California, and
The environment was very
it
different.
was very
And so,
different.
okay.
And
Yeah.
it was now it was different in the sense of, my family's always had, hustle your mentality. You got to get it, got to work, got to do it. But the environment that my family was hustling in here, it was like, you know, wake up. They woke up 4 o'clock in the morning to make sure they got to, saying the hot spot, with the drugs, because they knew that the drug user
But I mean, and I
wanted
don't,
it.
and I laugh not to be dismissive, but there is a work ethic to that as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
From what
absolutely,
hearing you say, okay,
and that is a work ethic, absolutely. But then when you saw the different work ethic in my family down south, where they were carpenters and they were business owners, and they would wake me and my cousins up early in the morning to go mow the lawn of the cemetery and help them build my aunt's church and things of that sort. That's
so
where
culture shock, but still something that you would lean upon
yes.
later as you went forward.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this: did you feel that you had to wear your personality armor, like show up as the tough guy?
Oh, that is such a great question, Ashley, because I can tell you specifically when my mother moved us back to California.
So that's when the performative part of your personality kicked in?
That's when it kicked in. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Now coming back from Mississippi to California at the age of 14, it was now as if I had to remind myself that I'm a Californian. I can fit back in with you guys. Again, this is from a five sensory perception. I'm not slow like we thought Mississippi was. I need to show you guys that I'm still up on the gang culture, the music, and things
So
of
you
that
had to
sort.
fit back in.
I had to learn how to fit. I felt like I had to learn how to fit back in.
That's fascinating.
And so it was easy for me. So now even my cousins that are here in California, we're all around the same age, 14, 15. Now to see them, actively living the gang life that we saw our aunts and uncles do, I felt like that's now what I have to do to show them that I haven't lost it. I'm back into it. So it was easy for me to join back in, especially when my mother and her husband then were divorcing, because he was very strict. He was a very hard nosed strict guy with me. And when he exited out of the picture, that I felt like it gave me even more space to it. Now, yeah, I don't have that strict hand on me. I can go out and do what I'm supposed to do. I can hang out with my cousins. I can skip class with them. I can go.
You try to be that
and,
tough guy. Like
yeah,
that part of the personality came through.
exactly. Especially and especially watch this, because this is where culture and authority comes in. Especially when you have your uncles that's like, you don't want to go to church. You know you don't. You know you want to come here. Come hit this. You know what I mean? Come in. And so it was like, oh man, I got to get my Cali back.
Trying to get my Cali
I got
back.
to get my Cali back. Those personality traits started to come out when I came back to California.
But I asked, this is when the armor
That's
part
when
of
yes,
you came out.
absolutely. And I'm glad you used the word armor, because our personality is that part of us that goes into the protective mode.
Yes, of course.
It goes into the survival mode.
Yes.
It does. Our soul knows nothing but compassion, peace, wholeness, love. But the things that have cultivated and shaped our personality is what our five senses first goes to, because it needs to protect itself. And that's exactly what those versatile parts of my personality did when I came back to California. And watch this, that's just on that environment end. But then when I saw, let's say, Also, when I saw a when I saw a white girl that I was interested in, I thought was cute. I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm not in Mississippi anymore. I can say something to her. You know what I mean? I can go into my Phil Collins mode. I can go into
Isn't that
my Kenny
wild?
G mode, and and I did those different parts of my personality started
When
coming
did
out
you
then.
then start marrying them, where you accepted that the armor was a part of you, but in marrying those two personalities, knew that you could live with both of them, but one didn't have to override the other. And it wasn't going to dictate the Dante who was going to evolve into the person he was supposed to be in his 20s, mid 20s, and so forth.
I would say two areas of adulthood, and that is when I became a parent
Mm-hmm.
and entering the workforce.
Okay.
The workforce first, because when it came time to sit down for an interview or go for a certain job, I felt like I had the different components of all the worlds I had been exposed to that I can go into a certain character.
Okay.
You know, I could sit in an interview and not use slang. I knew the proper grammar. But the moment it was time for me to have to protect my family, if we were somewhere, let's say like the mall or somewhere in public, then I knew how to quickly, they use the word code switch now, but I knew how to quickly go into South Sacramento mode.
Understood. Yep.
And I knew how to give off an aura that was like, I don't mess with OG.
Mm.
But then I could switch to another aura in my interview. It was like, when can you start?
Okay, then let me ask you this next, Dante, is when did you realize that the dance that you were doing with all the personalities of yours was no longer enough?
That started happening when um, conflicts I was having in my marriage was
Mm-hmm.
taking place. When the anger that I never paid attention to when I was younger started to surface.
Mm-hmm.
It became more of a temper. And when things like mismanaging my finances and those type of things started to really manifest. Even when it came to when I was struggling with the moral things that theology and my faith told me, don't do. So this is
Mm.
what we don't do, where morality started to hit. But then there was parts of me that really wanted to dig into. I was like, okay, just telling me not to do it, just telling me the Ten Commandments is not helping me stop doing this. There has to be a reason why. And when I started looking at all these manifestations, the why started being so loud. I started getting past trying to change the what's and got curious to the whys.
So your what's, you started to change your what's, which is your personality component, shall I say, is it safe to say,
Yes,
into
yes.
the why, which led you to exploring more of the soul component.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go there. The soul, they say, is the unchanging essence. It's also said if personality is the armor, what's underneath is the soul, because the soul isn't performative
No.
and it remembers. It's quiet, but also relentless. What was it that one moment that you thought, gosh, what I feel inside of me that I can't answer right now is contradicting everything around me?
I definitely can. Now, I can't give a specific moment,
Of
but I
course.
can definitely give you a specific season
Oh.
and when it's happened. After my theology training and now implementing my theology training as a minister, as a converted Christian and serving as a minister, one of the grateful things I'm still eternally grateful about is the way that the way I was trained in the theology school that I attended. I was fortunate enough to be provided the resources and the tools that led me into learning historical backgrounds, teaching the the life of, the authors of the books that were wrote. The pastor that trained me, he was very adamant about us digging deep into learning the traditions, learning the cultures, learning the customs and manners of those times in order to get the correct interpretations. He was
So it's not
very
just like
adamant about
here's the
that.
book, just learn what you can from it, but
Hmm.
really not expecting, but like saying you can move forward until you dive deeper.
Absolutely. And the thing about that was when I would go into my studies, when I would prepare for my lessons, I would prepare for my sermons, and I would use those tools to do that. It led me, my curiosity that I also had led me to go even deeper. And then on top of that, I had a courage about me. And I use the word courage because I would notice things that sound very contradictive. I
Mm-hmm.
would read one part of a scripture that would sound contradictive to another part of the scripture. And I said, why are, if 2 plus 2 is supposed to be 4, why is this 5? And I would go and do deeper research to where I would go and research like the original. I would go find the original uh, texts and manuscripts and be like, wait a minute, how did the English language get this out of that?
He enabled
And
critical
that,
thinking.
absolutely. And then when I got back, there was a courage in me that was like, no, this is not the truth. This is what we're getting is not true. I went back to the deeper original. What this is what it really means. It was in that season of my life that was like, wait a minute, there's more to all of this.
So the
This
exploration that began in your minister training
hmm
is when the first echoes of your soul started to emerge for you.
absolutely because my revelation, my reason for going into Christianity is because I had gotten a revelation. And when I started exploring things, it really started giving me understanding about my whys versus my whats. Because I would have questions about my whats. It was like, okay, like I would get frustrated. It's like, okay, I'm trying to change this habit about I'm trying to change this behavior, but it just seemed like it gets more tempting to do. You know what I mean? It shouldn't
Mm.
have to be that hard. And as I started opening up to that why in that season and started realizing that there was information that was talking to us more about the details of our soul and who we really are versus what the external world
Or shaped to be.
shaped us to be. I said, oh, I got to find out this difference. There's a lot of people in institutionalized, what I call institutionalized religious settings that think they know the difference, like I did, but there's much more to it. And I say that because when I opened up to it, I saw that a lot of different spheres of influence, like science, were all saying the same thing. But because we were so stuck on just how this particular script said it, we just locked down to that. It
And
was like,
differentiation and proving each other
mm-hmm.
wrong rather than really getting down to the overall theme
Yeah,
is where we get lost in the minutia. We get lost on the details. Yes, they're important, but sometimes you get so minute that the conversation derails and you never get to the real crux, which is it's always really simple.
we get so caught up in the differences and we fail to realize that we have a lot more in common
Yes, that's what I was
than we
getting to.
have different. You know what I mean?
Yes. So when you were in started this and you had this like light bulb and epiphany moment, right, Dante? What did it change in you? Furthermore, what did it start to spark in you and what did it start to when did it start to talk to you, your inner self start to talk to you?
Finding out the truth of
Mm-hmm.
what something really means was like confirmation to me. It felt like confirmation. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it
What
does. Well, it does for me. I hope it does for the audience as
uh,
well.
so when I would go study subjects, let's say like grace.
Mm-hmm.
Grace, when I found out the true meaning of grace, what that did for me, and understanding grace as an ability beyond my behaviors, beyond my habits, I felt I felt like it was a empowerment. I now if there is something I want to change in my life, I have something beyond my own ability to change it.
A deeper sense.
And so, whether it was grace or a deeper understanding about what faith is, it felt like confirmation to something I already knew about me.
Isn't that beautiful? So powerful.
Now, when it came to these so called, you know, habits and behaviors, when they came up, I no longer had to meet them with judgment.
Did you drop your armor to a certain extent?
Oh, absolutely. I was learning to drop my armor. I was learning because that takes time now.
Yes, of course.
It's it's a shedding of the old self. It's
It's what you're comfortable with. So how
yeah.
do you get uncomfortable now with the inner work and the what is now moving the needle on your soul?
It is now no longer dismissing or demeaning parts of my personality, but now dissolving them into who I really am. Dissolving them. Now understanding that the personality doesn't have to be dismissed or sat down. He or she is now led.
As you went through this soul, can I say soul awakening?
Absolutely.
Your soul awakening, how did it connect now to your deeper sense of identity? What did it change in you, Dante?
It changed in me the perception of the things I thought I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
who I thought I should be, and how I should behave. Um, it changed all of those different dynamics. It really did, to a point to where um, what I had become known as,
Which was what at that time?
um, I'll use husband for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use husband for instance.
It's okay.
Um, it was realizing that I became a husband not because I didn't love my wife, but I became a husband because it was a external expression of, an obligated title and a role that came with the world, the society, trying to tell us who we are and what something is. So now I'm operating out of expectations. I'm operating out of title and not out of actual uh, compliment and partnership.
Okay, let me ask you a tough question now, which is I understand what you've said about using the husband example. However, that role you stepped into, I'm assuming stepped into it because there was love there. So isn't love the soul component of what you led forward with? And if I understand you correctly right now, does that mean that the responsibility of the role overtook the soul, the love, and put it on the back burner?
I would say what is expected of us
Mm-hmm.
to be, whether it's husband, wife, um, um, co-worker, business person, whatever conditions have been put into the definition of what that thing is supposed to be, and it causes us to put the authentic love on the back burner just to meet those,
Mm-hmm.
is where the conflict comes in. It starts to strip away from who you really are.
Yes.
When the real you in that conflict is not at peace, not so much not happy with your job, not so much not happy with the person, but at peace with your wholeness, then when you make the responsible choice to your soul to say, I can't no longer be here, is now being interpreted as, you're breaking your vow,
And you're
or
showing up
you're not.
in a lack of mentality, and
Mm-hmm.
that is all encompassing of all the emotions and the noise that
Yes,
comes with it.
absolutely. And that is in so many different arenas in
Yes,
our life.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And thank you. You're brave enough to share a very personal part of your life as an example for this discussion. So I appreciate that. What has completely changed, let's say complete 180, when you leaned into the soul, not just listened, because you can listen and dismiss, but listen and took inspired action towards it, right? So, what changed in your life? What stayed and what went away?
I won't necessarily say stayed or went away. I would say I now understood how to be very aware,
Mm.
which I'm still learning to be aware in the moment, aware of what is being presented to me, and make a conscious, responsible choice from my soul. And in that conscious awareness, notice when the personality is being reactionary,
Oh.
is being reactionary, and from that soul, from that person that you truly are, tell that personality or parts of that personality, splinters in that personality. Hold on, wait. Okay, wait. Hold on, just a
Mm-hmm.
sec, just a sec. It's going to be okay.
We just need to take a
Yeah,
moment.
yeah. Take them. I know that bill is due. I understand that you would really like to give a rational explanation to what is happening at that moment, but let's remain calm for a
Mm-hmm.
minute.
I think it's amazing too, and listening to you is because of this exploration, you change the trajectory of your life.
Oh, big time. And this is not saying that it's wrong for anyone, because it is, even the right and wrong becomes dissolved. It becomes unified.
Mm-hmm.
There's no longer separation, to where now you're at peace with your own preference and you don't even judge the next person. Like, for instance, there was a time where I wanted that 5 bedroom house and own it and things of that sort. But now I have such a, not only contentment, but such a peace with my
Because you,
2 bedroom.
it doesn't
It's just,
define you because you are at
mm-mm.
peace with your inner self. And so often in today's world, with the noise and all our responsibilities that we're burdened with, and the dopamine hits that we get from every which way, it's really hard to sit with yourself, one, in silence,
Mm-hmm.
and two, if you're able to do that, get to a place of just say, I feel at peace.
I'm at
No
peace.
matter what is happening around me, there's a storm outside,
Mm-hmm.
I'm at peace.
And then you're at peace at that moment, because things change.
Mm-hmm.
Things change. The soul is here for the experience. Because because what the contentment I may have, that I have in my now, that's
Is
the word
different
about it.
than what I may have in my now at the same present moment.
It may be different from my now in the next year, 2 years, or
Yes.
5 years.
With the discovery of your soul and now having that lead and your personality follow or evolve, where you are right now with everything with life, what has remained unchangeable about you?
Ooh, my versatility. Definitely my versatility.
Would you say, because
And
you talked about that when we started this episode,
mhm.
would you say at that time, even though you didn't recognize that it was the soul part of you, is that the versatility, the personality, or the soul part of you?
It's both, because my personality, I've learned to dissolve my personality into my soul.
Oh, okay.
They're one now. It's now not so much my personality being protective or survival mode.
That's right, because
Hmm.
personality is survival. Mm-hmm.
Absolute personality alone. Personality left to its own talents, charisma, all of those things is, left to itself. It knows how to maneuver through, you know, when it's time to protect, when it's time to survive. But when it's being led by the soul, when personality gives submission to the soul and says, you know what, you actually have more intuitive information than I do.
Was there any a moment that you can remember very vividly of having deep knowing before the evidence presented itself because you followed the soul's voice, akin to what people say miracles, right? And I'm using that very broadly and largely, and I don't know if it's a miracle per se, but something that you can share with us here.
Yes, yes, yes. And it was during my time as a minister. I got some very good foundational understanding about the soul in my time in ministry, my studies in theology, and we call it spirit led, being spirit led. That had already given me a great foundation on how to hear that small, still voice. For instance, me and my family were struggling. We were struggling big time financially. I had recently lost a very good job, very good job that was bringing in a very good income, and we had got behind on our bills. I'm sure many people have experienced this,
We have
and
two.
but it was a real it was a position of now really testing my faith and really testing you know what I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And prayer was definitely a big tool for me to go to, to depend on. And I remember being behind on, my rent, per se, and didn't know where I was going to get it. I was still in between trying to find a good job to help us catch up financially. And I went into what we called, our prayer closet. I went to my prayer closet and I prayed. And I prayed. And I said, okay, I'm praying, but I'm also worrying at the same time. But then I said, you know what? I got to let this worry go.
Because you have to surrender.
Yeah, I have to surrender, I have to let it go. And while I'm in my prayer closet, I dropped the worry, and a small, still voice said, call your landlord and let them know you have $600 today. But my bank account was overdrawn. I didn't have it. I said, okay, that doesn't make sense. I almost got back into worry mode, but I said, okay, I'm getting back into worry mode again. And that small, still voice said, do it now. So I came out of my closet, and my wife at the time was, she was in worry mode. She was in distress mode. I said, you know what? I got to call our landlord and let them know to come pick up $600. And the look she gave me.
Are you crazy?
Exactly. So I went to pick up my cell phone, and I did. I called my landlord. I said, hey, don't have all of it, but I have $600 today. And where most landlords like, no, I need all my money now. She was like, you know what, Mr. Moore, that that works. I'll come and pick that up. But I still didn't have it. So I'm walking downstairs. As I'm walking downstairs in our house, a gentleman who was one of our youth members at our church, he came to me. He said, hey, I didn't know you was home. He said, I didn't know you was at home. I said, what you mean? He said, Minister, Sean just came by. He was another one of the ministers. He said, he just came by and told me to give you this. And he gave me 5 $100 bills. All right. I said, he just came in. He said, yeah. He said he just got, he was a construction worker. He said he just got a new contract for, he just got a new contract for $30,000. And he said something told him to bring you $500 just to bless you.
Wow. Oh,
But I'm still thinking,
upper body chills.
I'm $100 short. I'm $100 short. However, another one of our young adults from our church, because I was a barber I was a barber too. I was a licensed barber. He was sitting in the kitchen waiting for me to come and cut his hair. And that's when I knew I had to go downstairs because he was waiting on me. He said, for the haircut today, he said, I feel the need to pay you $100 for it.
So
and there was the $600 right there.
Miracles do happen if you just step inside and tap in. And this is why, I don't know when our conversation is going to go up and be presented to the audience. We're in different but very similar situations at the current moment. For us, you and I, who know better, we also are guilty of sometimes falling into the fear. Because what is tangible right now, you can't escape. And it takes a lot to remind yourself and go back into that prayer mode, into listening to that inner voice, especially when everything around you is so loud. And it's loud to the extent of it almost seems like somebody is playing drums right next to you.
Right. Yes, it does.
And it takes a lot of self-discipline to ignore that and to find the quiet within, to know that miracles are inbound and around us. We just need to stop, pause, remember, and give gratitude. That happens when you drop the external layer out, which is already talked about, personality, and go into the soul, the inner you, which we have been talking about thus far.
Because in all actuality, I have to say this. Because in all actuality, that event I just shared, we call that a testimony. That testimonies is what help us to remember. But I'm gonna take it even further, just in what I have been learning about the difference between the soul and personality, and digging more into that soul aspect of who we really are. What we call miracles is actually, I would actually say, it is what it is the rational term that we've given to things that happen beyond
Unexpectedly.
no, not even just that, but what happens beyond what the five senses can explain, because the five senses always looking for an explanation. It always needs
It's like
something.
tying science to spirituality and to religion to give people acceptance.
It always needs to make sense
Yeah.
to the person that just lives in the 3D five sensory perception. But what I mean by go deeper into that is what we call miracles is actually supposed to be, they are designed to be our norm. They're designed to be our norm. Our personality, apart from the soul, wants to predict. It wants to be in control. Why? Because it wants to feel safe. It wants to be in protection mode. It wants to survive. So I totally get that. But the soul that is from a realm, from a reality, an actual source, from the source of who we are, knows every outcome. It knows everything. So the more we dive deeper and become aware and more conscious that we are in that source, we're always in that source, we're never separated from it, we're never in it, those things that we call miracles start to happen on a normal. Now, does that mean that fear is not going to come up when the event is presented? No, but the more you begin to exercise more from who you are, your soul, that obstacle is seen as an opportunity, that challenge is seen as a choice.
But you have to get there. That takes discipline and inner work and rewiring your brain.
And
even
those are our superpowers.
Yes, and even for people like you and I who have been practitioners and not experts, but we're practicing every day and trying to get better, because something or the other will come along and it sets us back, right? Because that's why they say meditation is a practice. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, you have to, for my meditation even, is if I am away from it for a few weeks, I feel like I have to go back to the basics and
Absolutely.
get back up from there. It's a constant, lifelong thing. But just moments ago, in hearing you speak, what came to me was the soul is always waiting for us. It's always there.
Oh.
But we're so personality led and ego led that our ego won't allow us to go into our soul. It's the ego, isn't it? Always stopping us.
Always.
Okay.
Always.
You know, Dante and I, we try not to digress, and today we're doing really good because we haven't gotten prophetic like we do in our one-on-one conversations. But, you know, this is like, of the many conversations that we have here in between us, there's conversations like this that carry a lot of depth as well, that sometimes you may not understand in one go, or you might just say, "This, I can't listen to this within the first 10 minutes." But I think, and the reason I brought Dante here is he shows up unapologetically and so authentic to himself. When the soul leaves, and now there's an integration of your soul and your personality, how have your relationships or choices shifted? Because sometimes, as you're redirecting and dissolving, the people around you don't understand that because they're still used to a version of you that it no longer exists as you evolve.
And understanding that, that is because I've learned to understand that I am being perceived for the what's and I'm conveying the why. And I've learned to hear, even in the vocabulary, words that sound like blame, that sound like competition, that sound like comparison. When I hear those words, I know that it's my what's that is being uh, used to weaponize,
Strong words.
to weaponize. But then I use the whys and where they're coming from to not counterattack, uh, to not be defensive, not even have to defend myself, to even be compassionate in the situation. And
That's a tall order.
oh, absolutely. And it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. And I would say I'll boil it down simply by saying this: I've learned to not take things personal. What I mean by that is there is something happening in this interaction, in this exchange, that is beyond our personality. My perception of you is now seeing you from a soul view, not a personality view. Because beyond your personality, in your soul, just like mine, you're compassionate, you're forgiving. That person of who you really are did not want to hurt me. I did not want to hurt you. It was our personalities that did this. So because I realize that this is our personalities, our environments that shaped us to have these conflicts, and I'm now learning to see it from a soul perspective, I can now say that I'm not taking it personal. It's not me suppressing my emotions and how I really feel. It's really because I'm seeing you from a compassionate perspective.
What have you seen in your own personal life reflected back to you? Have you outgrown relationships, or have people, when you start having these conversations, say, okay, well, here he goes again. This is not the Dante I know, and just kind of walk away?
You know what? It actually, what it does, I'm going to tell you what it does. Um, it now makes you unpredictable.
People don't like that. You know, when you said that, the first word that came to my mind was, isn't that synonymous with dangerous? Or can be?
It can it can be it can be in a sense of dynamics
Like, I
that
don't
we've
know
seen
which
that
way it's gonna swing.
and things of that sort. So yes, there can be some dangerous dynamics to that. But what I mean by
No, I know, it's just being facetious.
like because I do that too. It's like, okay, wait a minute, man. What's about to happen here? I've done that as well to people. Um, but what what I mean by that when it comes to me now is people don't know what to do when they don't know how to control you anymore.
Yes, absolutely true.
And so when you become unpredictable and uncontrolled and uh, not able to be manipulated, then it causes an individual to have to either turn the threat temperature up and become violent, or back off and be like, what in the world is going on?
Because you are not categorizable anymore.
And you're beyond the label.
Yes.
You're beyond
Yes.
the label. You're no longer the label that they know you as now. And then what happens is, because of that, Now that your engagement with them is totally unpredictable and different than what they're used to, you can even see the nervousness in their body language. You can hear, a little bit of the shakiness and stuttering in their response.
Right.
You know what I mean? But even from a soul perspective, even from a compassion perspective, you're not trying to make them nervous because it's not about winning the argument. It's not about losing the argument. It's not about any of that. It's about resolve. From a soul perspective, it's about how do we work together equally, understand each other equally, make sure that there is a resolve. Because that's another thing about being learning the difference between the soul and personality. You're not trying to learn how to become such an expert at leading your personality where you now know how to control somebody better. You learn how to manipulate somebody better. That's still ego.
Yeah.
That's still ego. Because there's personalities that know how to do that. There are personalities that know how
Absolutely.
how to sway and, put on their Denzel Washington and, know how to put on their charm and, and things of that sort. And it happens unconsciously at times. To a point to where our professionals are now teaching people to know 10 ways to know she's attracted to you. Five
don't
ways to
even.
know that you're a stoic male. And it's like, dude, the conversation is on, saying why we can't find our mate. And then I'm listening to all this stuff. It's like, we ain't, nobody mentioned anything about compassion. Nobody mentioned anything about checking yourself. I'm hearing all of these expertise, and none of it has anything to do with checking the splinters in our personality.
Dante, you also talked about one of the tools that helps you is prayer. When we talk about the integration of soul and personality, what other practices or reminders have helped you keep connected?
I'm gonna answer that by using another word for prayer, which is communion. And I'm not talking.
I'm not familiar. I mean,
Okay.
I have heard of it, but I don't use that word. It's not part of my everyday
So
vernacular. So for people who are from different backgrounds, could you expand on that a little bit more?
absolutely. So one, I'm not talking about the communion as far as the wafer and Welch's, juice that we would partake on first Sundays, but I'm talking about understanding the common union. So communion, when you break that word down, is putting common and union together.
Mm.
It's your soul and your personality understanding the common union that they have with each other at all times in every moment. So now my prayer is not something I just do in the morning or at the time of the day. It's part of my, I'm practicing
Constant.
my constant conscious awareness.
Okay.
Now, there are moments where you do go and have, uh, you know, solitude time
Mm-hmm.
to practice it and become more in tune and aligned with it. But then it must become implementation and an engagement when you are dealing with the five sensory world. You know what I mean? So it's a common union. You got to understand that is everything. Everything is an opportunity for you to implement your soul exchange.
Mm.
Everything. Now, it doesn't mean that you're walking around at the gas station or grocery store like, okay, how is this engagement going to go? How's it going? But once it's presented to you, you know what I mean. And how is it? So what do you? When I mean presented, I mean presented in this way. You're driving. You can be driving on the freeway, and a presented opportunity is when that person speeds up and cuts you off, and you slam on your brakes. It's practicing enough common union to understand that that opportunity gave you a chance to either tell the personality not
To get angry.
not to get angry or flip them off, and the soul say, hey, you know, you never know, this could be saving you from something.
Mm-hmm. The delay.
You know what I'm saying? Versus you getting to the other lane, speed up, and now you guys are having a match of who's going to.
But that's you speaking from a graduated level. This is
Mm-hmm.
for people who need to get started. What practices or reminders could they implement? Because you said communion, but your approach and your example is somebody who is, I said graduated because it's practice. You've been practicing it,
Yeah.
and you've been able to evolve into that.
Mm-hmm.
However, those who want to now, perhaps it strikes something in them and they're encouraged to try it. What could be first thing that they could pick up that wouldn't be overwhelming and would allow them to go back to it the second day, the third day, and continue forward?
Notice your reactions and your responses.
So start simple, start there.
Start simple. Start noticing how you respond and how you react to people, places, and predicaments. Notice them. And when you notice them, practice to become aware of why you respond or react that way. And because that will open the door to self-reflection.
I love that you use this example because even in my mind, I was thinking, what tools is he going to say? And, that to me, I'm guilty of immediately jumping to something to hold on to. But when you say, go to this tool, people get overwhelmed by it. But the fact that you just say simple everyday reactions, that's what people can do because that is your present, time to time, minute to minute self awareness. Thank you.
Yes, because with all of the tools that we can use,
And there's a plethora of them out there.
there's so many of them.
Yes.
You
can't even keep up these days.
You can't even when it comes to things like your meditation and things of that
Yes.
sort, because next thing you know, those tools can become ways to just anesthetize your feelings and not and not give you answers.
Aptly put, yes.
And not give you answers. So now you're frustrated. You're upset that the person cut you off on the road, and you got this anger in you, but instead of finding an answer to that anger, you go to the meditation just to get anesthetized. But guess what?
You still haven't dealt with.
You still haven't dealt with it because now you got angry again at the next person that cut you off.
That was a great example. Okay, Dante, as we move into our next segment, and in preparing for our conversation, I realized, rather I should say, is there's people who have already posed this question or this topic of personality and soul way before us, and I'm so happy that there's a lot more conversations happening around this. And a couple of them that I came across was Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist, and he's done a lot more. But one of his quotes that really struck out to me was, it said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls."
Yes, we will.
I know I have done that in my younger years, and even sometimes right now when the voice gets too taxing. Not the voice, the noise and the external factors. I avoid listening to my inner soul. But if I just quieten the mind and quieten myself down, I would have received answers much faster than letting a week or 2 weeks go by and then going back and saying I would have found a solution by now.
We've all done it.
And that's why I thought this quote of his that I stumbled upon was so powerful. Another person that I came across was Howard Thurman. He is a religious figure, civil rights leader, and author, to name a few of his many accomplishments. And he said, "There's something in every one of you that awaits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have."
Absolutely.
And these words have been written well before our times,
Yes.
when we were young, and still very much true today. But it is, it's both striking and pleasing.
It is. And what I love about it, I love the way you use the word pleasing and even awakening, because the fact that these conversations are being had again, it's resurrecting, it's reviving, is making it even more obvious for the professionalized, lack of a better word, the more professionalized five sensory conversations that are happening. that are trying to still hold on to control, still trying to hold on to polarization. And it's becoming obvious. It is becoming
I think
obvious.
so too.
It
Yeah.
is becoming obvious
Yes.
the distinctions. Because one is getting exhausted no matter how professional it's getting. And the other one is becoming so much more peaceful.
Yeah. And peace
When you
and
get
peace looks different to everyone.
Yes.
You know?
Well, depending on what their definition is, absolutely. But what's good about the exhausting part? What's good about the exhausting part is the exhaustion still has a compassionate and merciful way of getting individuals and the collective that's holding on to that to a point to say, I'm tired of this.
But they have to get to that. I'm
They
tired
have to
of
get to
this.
that point.
Yeah.
Have to get to that point.
Dante, for the last segment of our conversation, the many deep layers of conversations you and I have is more layered. The relationship between men and soul. These are not the conversations we often hear men having out loud. And that's why this part of this conversation matters. Women, we can, most of us can confide and talk about our problems and even have these layered, deeper conversations. From your experience, do you have these conversations with the men around you?
Oh, absolutely.
But how
Absolutely.
common is it?
Based on where I am now in my circle, it's very common.
Well, yeah, of course, your circle, yeah.
But from where I came from, it wasn't none whatsoever. It's becoming. It is. It's starting to.
Is it?
Yeah, it's starting. It is becoming. It is becoming because again, it goes back to what we spoke about in the previous segment that people are getting exhausted, be it male or female. They're getting exhausted, and men are getting exhausted of having to hold up this particular persona that alienates the soul's true desire. Because the soul, because again, here's the thing about the soul. The soul itself is not a gender. Our personality and our bodies are. Beyond the labels of soft guy era and all of that type of stuff.
That's
man,
a conversation
you know.
that
So,
for another day.
but I said that because we there's been
But
labels
yes,
there's been labels out there
have emerged. Yes.
that hinders
Yes.
the authenticity of the soul to come and balance the scales
Well,
of your energy.
Dante, I ask you this because you serve in the community, whether it be I mean, and you've been in service your entire life, right? And what we didn't discuss here is you've worked in hospitals, your time as a minister, being a trainer, because that's how I met Dante. He was my hit trainer years ago. And so you come across a lot of members of the community from all walks of life.
Yes.
And so that's why I asked you if this conversation, this deeper soul conversations are being had amongst men, or is it just the yeah bro, did you see Monday Night Football and whatnot? Because there has to be more that the soul is craving. And there needs to be a safe space to have these conversations without being judged and say, okay, I had this conversation, now I can explore more parts of the whole of me, personality and soul. Not just an incomplete version of thyself.
Yes. And that that was great. That was great. That was so great the way you just put that. Because our soul having no gender is here for either the female experience or the male experience. But still from its whole
Whole, yep.
conversation I'm having with guys, I can tell who is, you know, just overdoing their masculinity, and overdoing their
That's because they
stoicism
probably
is
haven't come to a place
they
of,
haven't.
they're still leading with the armor, the
Yeah,
personality.
you have to give them grace because you have to understand that that's also coming from fear.
Yes, and the lack of education
Mm-hmm.
and the lack of knowledge that knowledge is out there, but it's the willingness to
Mm-hmm.
perceive it and be a willing participant to want to engage in a thought that is so different from the way you have been raised your entire life,
Mm-hmm.
and say, one, do I listen? Two, do I accept? Three, do I willingly integrate?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do any of those, it changes the dynamics not just of who you are, but the people around you. So there is a gain that happens, but the loss of it is your old life, your old people. And some people are not comfortable with that. And that is up to an individual if you are comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Comfortable with being uncomfortable, and you know what that uh, helps to do that. And I have to say this: learning how to identify your fears.
Hmm.
Fears. I say it with an S. And I have to emphasize that is because what is the first thing people think you're talking about when you mention fear? They think about the most extreme form of fear, which is scared.
Yeah.
Anytime, and I have not missed when I'm talking with people, when I'm advising people, and I'm sharing with them, and they tell me something, and I say, "Well, that sounds like fear. That sounds like a form of fear." The first reaction I get is, "I ain't scared." Do you know how many forms and faces of fear there is other than scared? Scared is the highest. It is the highest form. It is the highest. It is the most heightened. Is the most heightened form. I'll put it that way. It's the most heightened form of fear. But fear has so many faces and forms.
From your experience and being in the community for years, what are there cultural or emotional barriers too that are prohibiting people, and especially men, from having deeper conversations?
Yes, yes, there are. I am.
Culturally, I can understand.
Yes,
Emotionally,
yes. I do notice it. Example, I spoke about it. I mentioned it earlier about the difference between culture and trend. You have so many people that are trying to keep up with the trend that they really can't be the authentic. They can't let their authenticity come out. And then you have people that are so devoted to the culture. They know their culture. They're so devoted and loyal to the culture to where they can't even be their authentic self. So then I start to notice that there is a lack of understanding of what loyalty is.
and in hearing you say that, the word that came to my mind was guilty. They feel guilty if they try to step outside to embrace,
Hmm.
to explore, and perhaps marry the differences rather than letting it segregate and keep them in a corner.
Or even be sort of abandoned if they take the courage to
Yeah,
go against what they've
you are absolutely right. You are
you know.
absolutely right. Oftentimes, not only do you feel, but it is so much presented
Hmm.
to you that abandonment and the loneliness, the emotion of loneliness that transpires once you're abandoned is what keeps people stuck, unfortunately.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
because of the lack of self confidence in yourself, the abandonment because you need the acknowledgement
Hmm.
from people, that validation to fuel your self worth. And since we're talking about personality and soul, how have you led these type of discussions with your children?
I'm now with my children. I'm very transparent with them. My children have witnessed and experienced some of my most disappointing acts.
That's tough to say out loud as a father.
Oh, absolutely. They have witnessed some of my most disappointing acts, um, and I they've also have seen and heard me come to them collectively and even one by one, because there are times where I have to have an individual conversation and own up and take ownership of it. Take on full ownership on it. No blame, no finger pointing. It was all dad. But then also remind them, it gives me an opportunity to let them know everybody gets a turn. Be it health, finances, relationships, everybody gets a turn. So I'm sharing this with you openly and transparently, not to justify what you experienced and saw me do, but to let you know you there's a great possibility you're going to be presented with it too. And I don't, not so much now I don't. And I hope you don't let what you experienced be the defense mechanism, be the protective personality that you go to in order to handle it when it's your turn.
I'm hoping that the parents can take something away from this as well, not just parents, but it's what you said is can be applied to everybody. So, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. And Dante, I came across this too in preparation for our conversation, and I thought this was really powerful. Every pastor knows the moment when the prepared sermon falls away and something deeper starts to speak. So, being in service, a minister formally, what is your interpretation of this?
My interpretation of that is when it gets into the deeper part, you know it because although you may have experience in life with things, there's nothing flowing from your opinions. There is such a flow that is happening that is beyond your opinions, that is beyond subliminal messaging. And I'm listing those things because that happens in sermons at times. Me having been in that service, there are times where I've used the scripture and weaponized it, so forth and so on. But when it begins to flow so inclusive to empower everybody, even your enemies, that this is who we truly are. This is what life is truly meant for us. Oh, you sense it. You do. And that flow comes out, and then it even comes out to a point to where things that you didn't even write down in your notes are just coming out of you. Whew. I'm sorry. Because I remember that feeling that comes on you when that happens.
Dante, wow, what a conversation. I'm not surprised. Every time we sit down, this is what Dante and I sit down rather. These are the kind of conversations we always have. And if you would like to see Dante back on here for more conversations, because he can talk at length about compassion, empathy, the differences between, gosh, how we approach life. I mean, he has so much wisdom. And the reason why I brought him on here today too is not only do I know him as a friend, but because of his continuous education and never stopping to evolve and reinvent himself, taking accountability is one of the many reasons why I admire him, not just as a friend, but as a human being. So, irrespective of whatever we may be going through in life as individuals, you cannot take away from the value a man like Dante brings to the table. So, whether it be his spiritual knowledge, his physical discipline, there's so many areas of your life that you provide value. I have seen it firsthand. I am privileged to call you a friend, and I am so grateful that you took the time out to come and be a part of this podcast. Dante is not one of the people that you bring on for a fun conversation. Our conversations are always going to be deep. So thank you once again, and thank you to all of
Thank
you
you,
for
Ashley.
tuning in for this very in-depth episode of Between Us. I will catch you guys on the next one. Thank you.